What a moment for all the South Melbourne and Sydney supporters. It was a great day for the club. Our next guest is the man who's the president of the Sydney Swans, Richard Colless. He was the inaugural president of the West Coast Eagles back in 1987, and what a mighty team they became. He then went to the Sydney Swans and, well, for the last 19 years, he's the longest-serving president in the Caper, and he's the bloke who saved the Sydney Swans. And I say that and say congratulations to you, and couldn't be more, well, I could be more happy if I was in there this week, but I'm not, and you've pulled us out. But, mate, congratulations.
Thanks.
It's an enormous achievement what you've done personally and collectively with the organisation. You must be the proudest man in Australia.
Well, I don't know about that, but
should be.
It's something that I have a passion for, and it's such a privilege. You know, I think a lot of people do a lot of things for a long period of time, but for various reasons. I mean, for me, this is actually one of the great privileges and opportunities of my life, I have to say. I hope my wife's not watching, but she might have a different view.
Park that to the side, Suze, you'll understand. Yeah. But what was it like for you last week? Playing against my mob, we've knocked you over 11 times in a row, into the final, grand final on the line. But not only that, but the place was jumping in ANZ Stadium last week.
Walking across the ground at the end of the night, I was with a couple of co-directors, and I said, just look at this, and there's 20,000 people shoulder to shoulder, red and white, sort of screaming. Yeah, it was terrific. You know.
And they get it. It's not like the old days where they cheer at the wrong time or clap the wrong or say go number 31 or whatever it is. Yeah. They actually get the game, your supporters.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're passionate.
They are. And that's fundamental. And I mean, the difference between Collingwood and Sydney is you've got a lot more passionate people than we have, and that's where we've got to, over the next, won't be the next 5 years, but the next 25 years, bridge the gap. We need the fanatics are the people who basically underpin your football club.
How have you gone from South Melbourne, going up to Sydney and the Edelston era, bit of a joke for a long, long time, the Bloods, and now the Bloods stands for almost the gold standard in culture in a football club. How have you and your organisation been able to build yourself up in sometimes hostile territory, to build yourself now into one of the great clubs in the world?
Well, thank you for that. I think the first thing is being humble and not trying to muscle in on rugby league, rugby union codes that have been there for 100 years. I mean, the Edelston era, so-called, only lasted 10 months. Jeff was only there for 10 months. It was built on stunts, and I understand why, because there was no money. I think we had the luxury of the AFL providing us with some, modest but real financial support, and our focus was on building a footy club, and, that's what we've done. I think in terms of the culture, it's got to be bottom up. The players have got to drive it, but it's also got to be top down. The board and the executive have got to buy into it as well, and we seem to have reached a sort of a happy medium. One
of the great things you've done up at Sydney Swans is that you've been right through all the other facets of Sydney life. You're on their major events board, you've in your business life, of course, with ING, but also the Carbine Club, all these different places you've been able to get through.
Mate, I'm a junior Eddie Maguire.
but you've been able to do all that, and that's important, that Sydney has a presence. And what used to be a joke, I used to go up and do the stories as a young reporter, and it was the AFL was regarded as a joke, the game was a joke, aerial ping pong, gay FL, all that sort of, all the derogatory terms. Now the Sydney Swans are seen as I said, part of the fabric in Sydney. They might still resent a little bit, but they respect.
Yeah, look, I think that's the right word. I think we're respected. We mightn't be loved. We mightn't be top of mind for a lot of people, but I think we're generally seen as a genuine part of the Sydney sporting landscape.
Hasn't always been easy.
No, it hasn't.
Rodney Eade took you to a premiership.
Yeah.
It was an acrimonious breakup with him and yourself. Then there was all the Terry Wallace business that was going on. Then you sort of almost got lumbered with Paul Roos at one stage, and then what a success, and you worked beautifully together. The transition to John Longmire has been perfect nearly. It could be perfect at 5 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something you understand, because it doesn't happen very often that there's a handover from one coach to the other. I'm very focused on the culture and history and ethos of the Liverpool Football Club, where there were 4 or 5 guys. Shankly was the driving force. Then Paisley took over, and then Fagan took over, and then Dalglish took over.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're trying to build. That we don't need change agents coming in. We've actually got a culture that stands the test of time, and we have people coming in who have already added, real value and perhaps sort of tweak things, but don't radically change something that works.
Bill Shankly, of course, who said football's not life and death, it's far more important than that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's Roos's view of the world, but...
he had a bit more of a zen approach, and you had Kirky and these guys. You've been able to weave that different type. You've had Indigenous players come up and find themselves, not only as footballers, but as men.
Yeah.
It's been quite remarkable. You've had the Foreign Legion, which of course was what South Melbourne were known for back in the 30s, and you've brought them together. Even Josh Kennedy now is a guy who was discarded and is just a champion.
Yeah, look, I think Josh was circumstantial. I'm sure if he'd stayed there another couple of years, his talent would have risen to the surface. But they were long midfielders, and we were short midfielders, and we were able to do a deal. They did pretty well out of it. I think Stratton and Bruce were the two players they picked up as a consequence of the Kennedy-McGlynn trade. But we've got a pretty good track record of attracting sort of line ball talent from elsewhere and making them into better players. And it certainly works when managers are looking for a home for a player. You tend to have your door knocked on a bit earlier than other clubs.
Now, I've been all nice to you tonight. I'm being magnanimous.
So you should be.
Why were you so mean to me on Four Corners in 2002?
Some of the more high-profile people in Melbourne with considerable media expertise, business expertise, I think could do far more to grow the game rather than indulging too often in what I would call petty parochial football politics.
He says he's developing the competition and that high-profile people in Melbourne, quote, could do a lot more to grow the game rather than indulge in petty parochial football politics.
Yeah, well, good on him.